To ease tensions, the Indian and Chinese foreign ministers held discussions aimed at seeking a resolution to the prolonged border crisis in Ladakh. Talks between Indian Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar and his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi lasted for over 2 hours. The discussion between both the sides was termed frank and constructive. Both the countries have reached a 5-point consensus to guide their approach to the border situation along the line of actual control. Firstly, both the sides will continue to take guidance from talks between its leaders. This assessment was a clear reference to decisions taken by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping at their two informal summits in 2018 and 2019. Secondly, the focus would be on quick disengagement of the troops to ease the tensions. Thirdly, India and China will abide by all the agreements and protocols to maintain peace. Fourthly, the dialogue will proceed through a special representative mechanism. And lastly, both the sides will boost confidence-building measures. As per government sources, the Indian side highlighted its strong concern at the massing of Chinese troops and equipment along the line of actual control, saying that the proactive behavior of Chinese troops showed disregard for bilateral agreements. India called for an urgent resolution. Meanwhile, China has acknowledged the consensus. It has agreed to de-escalate and disengage and stop the provocations at the border immediately. China has said that it is ready for dialogue to resolve the issues. On this broadcast, we are now being joined by Atul Aneja. He's a China expert and former strategic affairs editor of The Hindu. Atul, thank you so much for giving us your time and joining us on WION. Now, it's a great step that, after months of standoff at the LSE, both the foreign ministers sat together, they held a marathon meeting and they've released a 5-point statement and promised to ease tensions along the line of actual control. So that's the first step. It was very important, isn't it? But what's most important is, will it reflect on the ground at the LSE?
Well, that's a million-dollar question, whether it will reflect on the ground or not. But let's go back to the statement. I think what it does is it spells out the rules of disengagement formally. How do we go from here? There is a reference to quick disengagement. I think that's important, that there's an urgency now to disengage and loosen this standoff, which we've had for a few months now. So, and the second thing is, on what principles do we disengage? I think there is a reaffirmation of the piece of all our confidence building measures, the framework within which the India-China relationship has been operating, which includes a series of confidence building measures. Essentially, that's a throwback to the 1993 Peace and Tranquility Accord, which was a foundational accord which led to serial confidence building measures further down the line. It is also a reaffirmation that the basic foundations of India-China relations remain as they are, which really began with the 1988 visit of Rajiv Gandhi. This is important because after the June 15 Galwan incident, there was an opinion which was building up in India that the India-China relationship has to begin right from scratch. This statement says, no, once we achieve de-escalation, we go back to where we were. And that's where the references to Wuhan and to Chennai summit become important, because the outcome of those understandings which were reached between two heads of state and government remain valid, and the present standoff has not in any way disturbed the momentum of those principles. And I think there is also a mention in the statement that the troops have to go back to the permanent positions, which essentially is a reiteration to India's position.
Absolutely.
That the status quo ante has to be maintained. I think that is again benchmark which has been sort of fixated through this statement. So now we have an ironclad framework of disengagement, the rules, and how do we go about it? Then I come to your question, will the Chinese implement it? Will it happen? Now that's something we have to wait and watch. But we know now how to go about it. We move then now to the next phase, which is the military commanders talks. Your own channel mentioned that the core commanders talks is going to take place very soon.
Yes.
And so what happened yesterday in Moscow will feed into that dialogue now. Because now the core commanders have a clear guidance of where to go, which is quick disengagement.
Right.
So I think this is very important in now fueling this nuts and bolts dialogue at the military level, once the principles and the rules have been firmly affirmed.
Right. Atul, India has always maintained right through the standoff that Chinese side has to respect the status quo ante. That is, go back to positions that existed before the flare-up of tensions in May this year. China has so far not done it. Do you expect Chinese to do it after the foreign ministers' meeting? And you also mentioned confidence-building measures. But the fact on the ground is that there is a massive trust deficit between the troops of both the sides, especially after the Galwan incident, isn't it?
I think I agree with you that there is enough room for skepticism, and we shouldn't shed, I think Ronald Reagan once said, when it came to talks with the Soviet Union, that trust but verify. I think in our case, it's verify and trust. That,
right.
The Chinese have to walk the talk now. So I think it's legitimate on our part to be skeptical about Chinese behavior in the future. But I would add to that things have shifted on the ground. And I make specific reference to the action by the Special Frontier Forces on the 9th of 29th and 30th. You see, India has got something on its hand which will feed into negotiations. We are occupying heights along the South Bank, which is looking down at his Moldo garrison, which is looking down at Spangor Gap, it is looking down at Finger 4, where he's accumulated. So you, for the first time, for the lack of a better word, you have bargaining chips. And this is the change which has taken place since 29/30th.
Right.
So will China now be more amenable? I think we have the cards to force him to do so. And therefore, we are in a better position to break his will and sort of de-escalate, not in a superficial manner, but in the manner as stated by the statement, which is going back to the peace station.
Right.
I think that is something which remains. I'm more hopeful now by the talks and what preceded the talks. That is the action of the Special Frontier Forces, that we have some leverage to persuade him.
Right. You mentioned the action by the Special Frontier Forces is it crucial that the action that they took occupying strategic heights on India's side of the line of actual control, did that put India in a position of strength and gave India additional bargaining chips, like you mentioned, when the negotiations happened? So that action in late August was crucial, isn't it, for India to be at par with China when it comes to the ground situation along the line of control?
It was absolutely critical. We were in a defensive mode before that. It completely changes the scenario where you are in a proactive, in fact, in an offensive mode in some way, not specifically in a military sense, but really now you have leverages. In what way? You can do something in case there is a change in behavior or there's an attempt at further escalation. You have something with you where you can respond and retaliate. I think that has been critical, and the Chinese recognize that. I mentioned they have near Chushul, you have the Moldo garrison. You're looking down right at the Chinese Moldo garrison and all his accumulation of forces, and he knows that. And if you have enough weaponry where you are standing, you can take action.
Right.
Right. And so also on the other features of where he has accumulated his forces, which is Finger 4 especially in that area, and it is in your line of sight.
Absolutely.
So that has been absolutely critical. And I think you now are in a position to negotiate from a position of strength, which you were not earlier. The earlier phase of military dialogue talks, we were not negotiating from a position of strength, but this has fundamentally changed the equation. We are now talking of negotiating from the position of strength. And here it's important what the statement says: quick de-escalation and not altering, freezing the situation as it is, followed by de-escalation. I think this is very, very important now, that I don't think we should be expecting any kind of action from the Chinese side through the Air Force or through the artillery or whatever way to dislodge the Special Frontier Forces from the heights which they are occupying. I think we are getting into the mode of a very serious conversation. But I would again caution that it's a long way off. This is a marathon which we are running with the Chinese.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right, Atul, thank you so much for joining us. Full credit to our frontier forces on the ground and full credit to the leadership in New Delhi that for now, India and China have released a joint statement, and we hope that this eases the situation along the line of actual control. Thank you so much for joining us, Atul.